Welcome everybody to another episode of Lazio Lounge. The second official match of Lazio has been played yesterday against Juventus. Lazio still 0 point in the table after two matches, which is not great. But I'm asking to Alistair Mackenzie, my guest today. We can say that seeing the fixture of this season, we could expect something like that, right?
Well, yeah, that's it. I suppose that's what everybody has to keep in mind at this stage, because it couldn't have been harder with the fixture released, and clearly everybody would have preferred to have come away from the first 2 weeks with at least something to show for it. But it's not a complete disaster. The way that I've kind of tried to think about this is that in 4 games against those two teams last season, we only got 3 points, and we still managed to be fighting for the Champions League into the last day. So that goes to show that, losing these first 2 games isn't necessarily a signal of a terrible season ahead.
No, I totally agree with this. This is a valid point that I didn't think about. And, I'm usually the negative, Mr. Negative, and you are the Mr. Positive, but after the match of yesterday, I saw a lot of positive sign from Lazio performance against Juventus. Obviously, there are some bad things because Lazio didn't win, but I think there are a lot of positive things to talk about after the performance of Lazio yesterday. Don't know if you agree.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a real shame that the scoreline in my mind doesn't really reflect how evenly balanced that game was for long periods. And yeah, it does sometimes feel like you're clutching at straws a bit when you come away from a defeat by 2 goals and start talking about everything that went really well. But there are definitely some obvious indications of improvements and also some individual performances which made a difference. I mean, I'm sure we'll get round to talking about him, but above all, Wallace. I mean, that was an absolutely extraordinary game from him, and the likes of which we've not really seen before. So that performance in itself was enough for me to come away with at least one really positive aspect. But I think on the whole, you could see an improved condition in the team, a good defensive structure. And I think when it comes round to playing Frosinone next weekend and in general playing weaker teams in this league, we'll start to see the fruits of that.
Football is bizarre sometimes. Lazio lost 2-1 against Napoli, and I thought Napoli deserved more the win than Juventus against Lazio, who won 2-0. So, seeing just the score, you can think that Juventus dominated. Instead, I thought Lazio played in some circumstances better than Juventus, but was really unlucky. The both 2 goals of Juventus was.
Yeah, I mean it was.
Yeah, go on.
Sorry, I wanted to point out again that it was kind of a replica start to last weekend, though, and that the 2 games didn't have an awful lot of parallels beyond that. But Lazio again started really confidently and really strongly, and Inzaghi said after the game that it's not enough to have quite a good performance, but if he can find a way of getting getting the way his team start games to sustain that throughout them, then that we're on to a winner, really. And, 2 negative results, but in flashes, Lazio looked like the dominant team against, the top 2 teams from the last 2 seasons, and that can only be a really good thing.
Let's take off the bad thing immediately so we can talk about the positive side of the match. I thought the biggest issue was that Ciro Immobile was too often alone playing against all the Juventus defense. Luis Alberto and Milinkovic-Savic didn't shine. I think they're behind in the preparation, and they're not fit yet to play against this top team. Maybe against Frosinone it's going to be different, but I thought that was the biggest problem. Lazio was hard, never really dangerous, even though they had created some chances and had the ball in the Juventus box.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you have to remember as well that it's a team that likes to have the ball, and it's a team that likes to be able to kind of dictate the rhythm of the game and, take control of it. And so to play against the two teams in the league who you're really going to struggle to control possession, dominate possession against, it's never going to be as easy. And I do agree about the point with Immobile being isolated. I thought there was a big gap between midfield and attack yesterday, which was a bit of an issue. And to say that the defence is more impressive than the attack is something we're not used to, but I think it has been the case really in the last games.
Yeah, I thought, we were all worried, and if anybody of our listen wasn't about Wallace playing and be on the side of Cristiano Ronaldo, please tell me, because I think it was the biggest concern we all had going into that match. And then Wallace was terrific. I thought cancelled maybe is too much, but he neutralized Cristiano Ronaldo. I think he had just one chance at the end of the match. I believe, and I was thinking this today, I don't remember a better performance of Wallace since he joined Lazio. He was really terrific, and we always said that Lazio need a better defender, but if Wallace plays like this till the end of the season, then I think Lazio solved the problem they had in defense. Really, I thought he was the man of the match yesterday.
Yeah, me too, absolutely. And the Lazio fans as a whole did as well, because he was voted the man of the match on Twitter as well by the official account. Completely agree. I mean, about it being his best game for Lazio, I definitely can't think of a time that he's stood out so much. Anticipated things so well. His passing, I thought, as well, was very accurate. He was calm on the ball, which is something that you've not always been able to say about him. And it is interesting because we've spent the summer really saying, in our in these friendly games, why is Inzaghi insisting with Wallace in a back three with Acerbi and Radu? Why is it not Cáceres or Luis Felipe or Bastos? You have to say hats off to Inzaghi, because he's clearly seen something in him, and talked about this a couple of weeks ago in terms of his attitude. Wallace has had a very positive attitude about the new season ever since the last one ended, and he clearly has kind of come back with an extra motivation, and he doesn't want he doesn't want to be remembered as a failure in Rome. And if he can somehow be transformed into the player we saw last night throughout an entire campaign, that's going to be the equivalent of having a new signing, and having the signing that everyone really was hoping that we could get in the summer.
Yep. Tonight we don't have train, we have motorcycle, huh? This time is...
Yeah, sorry.
We're changing.
You have some atmospheric Roman background noises, at least for another 5 minutes, and then I'll hopefully be back indoors.
I thought, Wallace had a great match. I don't know, how much do you think playing near Acerbi helped him? Because we were all saying that Acerbi obviously is not the Vrij, but I think the leadership how Acerbi played that position, that central position, is helping all the defense. Now, obviously, it's hard to say now. Lazio played 2 matches and allowed 4 goals, but it was against Juventus and Napoli, the best team of last season. I thought it's funny to say, but I thought Lazio defense played well against Juventus. Absolutely better than the attack. We're going to talk about that later, but I thought Lazio defense was great.
Yeah. I mean, you look at the goals really, and the Pjanic strike. It's one of those things, It's a remarkable piece of technique, and you have to take off your hat to him and say, if you're going to require something like that from the opposition for them to reach your defence and score a goal, then that you're asking a very high quality goal. Some people have said Strakosha could have got across quicker. Others have pointed to there being possible offside call for it as well. But at the end of the day, it's a remarkable, it's an exquisite goal, really. But I agree. On the whole, the defence has been positive, and you say 4 goals in 2 games has been conceded, and that's not a particularly pleasant statistic. But on the other hand, in just 2 games against Napoli last season, 8 were conceded. So I do think it's definitely too early to be pressing the panic button. It's the same thing we said last weekend. In order for that opinion to really be backed up, though, it's absolutely imperative that next week now this team go and prove a real point against what looks like a really weak Frosinone team.
Yep, I think the season of Lazio starts next Sunday against Frosinone. It would have been nicer to arrive to that match with some points already, but it was tough. Just see what Napoli did yesterday. They were losing 2-0 against AC Milan, and they were able to win 3-2. I think Napoli didn't do a great transfer market, but the team is still very good. And with Ancelotti, maybe they have that balance that they didn't have with Sarri last season. So it was a tough match. I thought, and this is maybe the biggest problem Lazio is facing now. I think last season the top players were on form for the Supercoppa Italiana, while this season I think maybe because Lazio ended last year on their knees, that maybe it was better to not arrive at half August with all the players in top form. And you can see that, Luis Alberto is not running like he was doing last year. Same thing for Milinkovic-Savic. I think they're not fit. And one thing I noticed is when Correa came in, Lazio looked to have a different speed in front. And obviously this is something that that can make Lazio more dangerous than it was with Luis Alberto playing. Now, I'm not saying that Luis Alberto is not a good player, etc. Simply, he's not in form at the moment. And this didn't help Lazio with this tough fixture they had at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, precisely. And I think, in my opinion anyway, Correa needs to be put into this team as soon as possible, really, because he, like you said, you mentioned his speed, his sharpness. He looks like a really quality player, but on top of that as well, he looks like someone who's desperate to make an impact and desperate to, come on and make an impression at a new club. And in the first 2 games, he's obviously not had the chance from the start. There's only so much you can do as a substitute later on in the match. So a team like Frosinone, that could be an ideal opportunity to actually insert him straight into the starting lineup and see what he could do. Because I do agree that Alberto's not quite been himself. Milinkovic-Savic has also not been himself in these first 2 games. Again, I think it's too early to make any harsh judgments on on form or fitness with either of them because they've had two very hard games. But if you have got 2 weeks in a row where players are performing below par, then as a coach, there's a responsibility really to make the most of the tools at your disposal. And in Inzaghi's case, Correa seems to be the most the most ready and willing guy in that squad to stand in and get that forward line moving again.
So to answer the question Patrick Bowman asked us about Inzaghi should be changing the starting 11, you think that against Frosinone, Correa should start instead of Luis Alberto?
I would like Correa to start either instead of Alberto or alongside Alberto. I still like the idea of this theoretical 3-4-2-1 that we've heard a lot about but haven't actually seen yet with Badel and Leyva. But I don't necessarily think against a team like Frosinone we need to have such a solid, perhaps more defensively orientated structure. So I don't think it would be the worst idea to maybe put Alberto into the side a bit further back in the team, like he did at stages last season, and have Correa in that team as well. Blow them away, first 20 minutes, 25 minutes, just blow them away. And I think that will make things a lot easier for Lazio. And it's a team that needs a bit of confidence at the moment. If they can go into that game and be 2 goals up by half-time, they'll win that game. If they go in at half-time and it's still a draw, or, God forbid, they're losing, suddenly the crowd starts to get nervous and players start to get nervous and angry, and they've not responded well to those kind of circumstances before. So I think I'd like to see an attack-minded approach next weekend and just try and get on the front foot from the first minute.
We saw in the second half yesterday against Juventus in the last, 25 minutes, Lazio finally playing with a 3-4-2-1. We saw Badel coming in instead of Parolo. What was your impression of that? How Lazio played there like that?
Well, it's quite hard to get a real impression from the strategy changing and the shape changing at that stage of a game, because obviously so much had happened before then. So I don't know. I was a little surprised, to be honest, if Inzaghi was going to choose a moment to bring that out. I didn't think that would be it when his team needs to go. I did think that Lucas being back made an enormous difference, and especially in that first half, it just seemed to bring so much confidence into that team. But I think they really need to start the match together to build a platform off in that shape. I wasn't convinced it was the right move at that stage of the game.
Thumb on Facebook asked us, do you agree that our attack is too one-dimensional? And maybe that I mean relying too heavily on throwing ball to Immobile like it happened to against Napoli. And if so, what other formation or idea do we have? Well, obviously, as I tweeted yesterday, I believe, Alistair, you agree with me, Lazio get far more dangerous when Immobile, Luis Alberto and Milinkovic-Savic plays at their best. They can be really dangerous and create so many chances. When that doesn't happen, well, at the moment, does Lazio have a B plan? Well, if the solution to replace Ciro Immobile is Casado, I don't think the wingers should be pushing a little bit more. But as we said about Milinkovic-Savic, I think it's the same about Marusic. He's still not fit to perform that well. And Lulic is always a little bit hit and miss. He had a big chance in the first half, and then didn't create nothing special afterwards. So Lazio need to have someone else. Berisha could be that type of player, but he's out with injured. There is the chance that he could be able to play against Frosinone a bit, or at least being called for that match. We're going to see. But I think the biggest problem of Lazio is that if Lazio doesn't play well, it's hard to see Inzaghi's team winning a match. They have to perform well to do it, which big team doesn't usually.
Yeah, I do see your point. It's a team that needs to. I mean, Inzaghi said this actually after the game himself. He said this is a team that needs to believe in what it's doing and have more belief in itself. And you can see what he means because, like I've already mentioned, in the opening stages of the last two matches against Napoli and Juventus, both of the top two sides in the league last season, there were stretches where Lazio were the dominant team, and as a result, in both these games, they've proven that they're clearly capable of being at a level where they match these sides technically, where they're capable of not only defending well, defending aggressively, but creating chances going forward as well, and at least applying a pressure in the final third as well. The thing that slightly worried me was seeing Inzaghi say, when he was asked about the tactical changes, the possible change of formations, he basically said that the team did well in his first full season when he was changing tactics, but then last season, when he wasn't doing that, they ended up with 2 more points. So in his mind, I suppose that can be a justification for sticking with, one idea, because despite everything, it did result in a higher points tally for the club last season. But I think he's got a squad, we've talked about this time and again, but he's got a squad with so much versatility in it and so many different options around it that the pressure is on him as well now. It's not just out the players, and the players are the ones we talk about the most often, and they're the ones that will get the majority of the praise or the criticism as the season goes on. But Inzaghi does have a very talented and versatile squad available to him, and if it's not working, it's his job and it's his responsibility to find the answer to it. I think we've seen enough in the first 2 games to not be losing faith in him in any way. I don't understand the people who are critical of Inzaghi week in, week out. But yeah, I do think that it's if it continues to not work for much longer, then he does need to look at finding the answer.
Well, I thought compared to last season, Inzaghi changed tactics during the match. He did against Napoli. He did even yesterday against Juventus. So I think he's open to that, and I don't believe he wants to go back to the 4-man defense. I think he stick with a 3 line. But as I was saying, we saw a lot of changes because I believe now he knows that his midfielder can adapt to different solution, which is something that Inzaghi is trying to do. So, yeah, I'm a little bit concerned about all this criticism against Inzaghi, against Strakosha, that have been sent after Napoli matches and so on. I think really we should a little bit relax and think you can lose against Juventus and Napoli. It's nothing terrible. Inzaghi is trying to find the right formation. We were all concerned about Wallace playing against Cristiano Ronaldo, and then he was man of the match. People was complaining about Strakosha, saying he should be benched, and he had a great match yesterday against Juventus. I think he was, after Wallace, the best player for Lazio. So, I think the situation is not that bad. What concerned me most is probably the condition of the performance of Milinkovic, Savic, and Luis Alberto, because so much depends on them to Lazio to be dangerous. But at the same time, there's Correa that could be a valid option if Luis Alberto doesn't start performing.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, I suppose what you have to bear in mind is that, fans, the whole point of being a football fan, I suppose, is that you get an emotional reaction from the results that you see and the performances that you see from your team. So the fact that Lazio have lost their opening 2 games means that fingers will be pointed and in various directions, rightly or wrongly. But on top of the first 2 defeats of this season, it's also the fact that last season ended with 3 games without a win. So it's starting to feel like it's been quite a long time since we've seen Lazio win a match. But I do think that, you do always have to keep things in perspective, and actually, the closer you look at the squads, the performances, and the improvements, the more, well, for me anyway, the more faith you have that something good can come from it. And look, Inzaghi's a guy who's got better with each season, and last season, it's the most goals we've ever scored in this league. It's the most points and most wins that we've had in this league since won the Scudetto. So to criticise a guy who's pulled that off and suggest that you have a better idea of what frame of mind players are in or what tactics you should be using is, everyone's got a right to their opinion, but I just don't get people who are absolutely hammering Inzaghi every week. Certain decisions should be called into question, but not his overall management and his record. I think that, like you said before, the season does start next weekend. If anything, we've got the difficult games out early on, and every game really should be seen as a winnable game or a game that Lazio can consider themselves favourites in. Or they should have the belief that they can consider themselves favourites in from now on. It's just a bit annoying, really, the timing of this international break as well, because if were we to get a big win over Frosinone next weekend, to then have to stop for another week I don't think anyone's ever very happy about that break.
No, even though you have the time to recover, Felipe Luis could be back after the break, so that could be useful. And if Berisha doesn't make it for Frosinone, then he should be able to be back with the rest of the squad after the international break. On Twitter, Alexander Mikkelsen asked, in my opinion, we played better tonight than last year at Juventus Stadium. Last year we were lucky. This year you scored the opportunity. Do you agree, Alistair?
Yeah, it's an interesting comment, that one. To be honest, in order to answer that question, I'd have to see the other game again. But so no, I mean, I can't say that I think it was a better performance because you've come away with such different results. And yeah, luck always plays a part in football, but I don't think Lazio were particularly unlucky last night by anything that happened. I don't think the goals that were conceded were a result of any sort of misfortune. It's just the way that the game went, and I don't think we created enough really to say that at the end of that match we deserved to have drawn that game or deserved to have won that game. But it's a valid point he's raised, because it does go to show that to go to Turin and play in the assured way, the confident way that Lazio did, especially the start of that game, but actually towards the end of the first half. And, there are various spells within that match that Lazio were the more threatening, the more aggressive team. And I think that to go to Turin and do that, it's not easy, and not many teams do manage to do that. So I was encouraged by that, because Juventus is a team that Lazio have had such a bad track record against, that I think getting those wins last season, the one in Turin and the Supercoppa, has
does look like it's made a difference. I don't know if you agree, but I do think you can see a difference in the mentality, the confidence of the players in this fixture now as a result of that.
I thought the biggest difference was the confidence, the killer instinct. Last year we didn't have that many chances, but we took them, all of them. This year maybe we had more ball possession near the Juventus box, but we didn't take the chances. I remember 1-on-1 of Ciro Immobile against Bonucci, and he should have done better. Instead, he didn't. He was a little bit scared, and when you are 1-on-1 against Bonucci, especially when with Bonucci running backwards, you have everything to, especially if you're Ciro Immobile, to dribble past him and shoot. Instead, he didn't. I thought Lazio were a little bit scared compared to last season, and that was the biggest difference of the match. I agree that Lazio probably played better, but yeah, maybe the confidence after a defeat against Napoli wasn't there. So probably that was the biggest difference. But thinking about Leva performance, the defense performance, I think this team has a lot of positive things. Yeah, I think it's all start next Sunday. So we're going to see what happens. Talking about next Sunday, it's never easy to say these things, but the team comes first. Lazio is more important than everything. And as Stefan Scarpulla tweeted us, how many poor results before we ask Alistair McKenzie to move back to Scotland? I think Frosinone. If Lazio doesn't win to Frosinone, Alistair, you're out. You have to go back. I'm sorry.
Yeah, putting some calls with the immigration office over here.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I did see it. I was actually wondering how long it would take before we got a comment like that, to be honest. Give us a chance, guys. It's just been one home game, so we'll get there. I'm sure that the team's going to be encouraged by my presence again next weekend and see us through to a memorable victory. But I mean, jokes aside, Frosinone, that is a game that this team has to win now. I mean, it's so important. I mean, there are a number of excuses you can make, or we're capable of finding the positives from these opening 2 weeks because of the opposition. But it's still the first time in 12 years Lazio have gone without points in the first 2 weeks. And to then not get 3 points against Frosinone would, if you consider the kind of panic that has hit a lot of supporters already, I can't even imagine what the reaction would be to not getting points in that game. So I saw a fair bit of their game against Atalanta last week, and they looked dreadful. So that is promising. And
they just drew 0-0 at home against Bologna, so they're not playing.
Yeah, so I
great
don't think
football.
they're a team that are going to give us many sleepless nights in advance of the game. But if anything, that increases the I suppose the pressure and the expectation of a win. And we all remember the opening game against Spal last season, and the fact that didn't. We were thinking very confidently ahead of that, and obviously that didn't work out so well. So, yeah, it has to be a win next season and next weekend. I mean, and this is why I said before I'd like to see that Inzaghi set out the team to attack from the start and to take control of that. If we start the game next weekend, though, in the same manner and the same confidence that we have in the last two games, I'm convinced that we'll find the net sooner or later. But yeah, it has to happen.
By the way, Inter was winning 2-0 and finished 2-2 against Torino. De Vrij scored, but Inter had a better fixture, but it's just 1 point ahead of Lazio. Surprising, right?
Well, yeah, of course. I mean, this is the Inter team that's going to win the Scudetto, no? But it goes to show, I mean, certain teams, it's the same every season. Some teams start slowly, some teams start quickly. the only thing that really counts is what the table looks like at the end of the season. Lazio can go under the radar now, where, having been bottom of the league, Lazio aren't going to get so much attention, but I think if anything, this team kind of copes better in those circumstances. So to get through these weeks, play some lower teams in the table and start to pick up points and generate momentum, move up the table, that might actually turn out to be a decent route for this team. Whereas Inter, like you say, if there's high expectations on a team and they've had difficult games, but games they really should have been winning in these first 2 weeks. So for them, it's a totally different thing because they've, like you say, they've come away with only 1 point from 2 games that everyone expected them to win, and now they've still got their huge challenging games against top 4 rivals still to come. So at least Lazio have got through the fixtures against the 2 teams who we would have the least confidence about winning.
Yeah. Let's not forget that against Napoli and Juventus in the recent past, we didn't win very often, or we hardly win. I think the last time we beat Napoli was the 4-2 that qualified for the Champions League, and Juventus simply last season twice, but before that, Lazio always struggled. Stefan Scarpulla also asked us, 2 matches in a row chasing points and Simo doesn't trust Donkey, Caicedo nor Rossi. Where is De Vice Immobile?
Well, where is he, Vittorio?
I'm here.
I wish we had an answer to that question. I wrote something about this earlier this week about the Vice Immobile problem. Something I found quite interesting while I was doing a bit of research on the article was about, the so-called dependency on him. He scored a third of Lazio's league goals last season, which is a high percentage, but Icardi for Inter scored 44% of their goals, which is a very marked increase. That goes to show that there are goals in this team without Ciro. I don't think it is a dependency problem necessarily, because there are a lot of players in this team who can score goals. Milinkovic-Savic was the highest scoring midfielder in the league last season, and Alberto was only 1 behind him. So I think the question of getting the attack firing isn't just about Immobile, and it's not just about who stands in for Immobile. It's about finding answers within the rest of the squad. And we've already talked about Correa and what he could possibly offer off the bench, but I think Inzaghi has to look at ways of getting this squad to be the most dangerous it can be. And the fact that, as the question you brought out there mentioned, he's not turned to Rossi or Caicedo, it goes to show that those aren't players he trusts anymore, I would say. But I think he's quite right to be looking at other areas of the team, tactical changes and new signings to change things.
I see it a little bit different. You remember last season we often talked about Inzaghi switching too early to the desperate mode and putting all the strikers on the pitch together and creating chaos instead of making Lazio attacking more. I thought that maybe he changed on that side. We said last week that he put in Cataldi instead of Caicedo just because he felt that our midfield was struggling too much, and I thought he did pretty much the same yesterday, adding Durmis at the end to use a little bit better the wingers that weren't working that much in that part of the match. So I don't think he doesn't trust Caicedo or Rossi. I think simply he is trying to not go as soon as possible to the panic mode as he did in the past. Plus, I'm still hoping to see Rossi start playing a little bit because, I think he's really talented. He played so well this summer, and Inzaghi is not the type of managers who's shy to to try a youngster in front of an experienced player. So I hope maybe against Frosinone to see him playing a little bit, maybe in the second half. But yeah, we said it. We are not happy about having Caicedo as the first option for replacement to Ciro Immobile. So that's a problem. But we'll see what's going to happen in the next week. I think that's going to give us answer to this question.
I think it will actually, yeah, because it would have been quite a bold move. I know you say that Inzaghi's not afraid to give youngsters a chance, and he's not, but it would have been a big, brave move for him to bring on Rossi in either of the last two games, and also Caicedo, because Caicedo, to bring him on, you'd have really been replacing Immobile unless you're going to go with two up the top, but that's not something that he really likes to do too much. So a really telling moment, I think, is going to be when it comes to making that substitution for the first time to bring on a striker. Who's it going to be? Is it going to be Rossi, or is he going to be going back to Caicedo? I think that'll be a really interesting moment to see whether Rossi's done enough in pre-season to suddenly be the first option, I suppose, from the bench.
Yeah, I think it's a valid point, and we're going to see if this is going to happen against Frosinone. That maybe is the best chance to try the Alessandro Rossi. Walem Mohamed is asking if Faris is the technical mastermind in Lazio. Maybe it's time to change him or his manager. I thought Lazio prepared very well the match yesterday against Juventus. I think the fact that Juventus didn't create that many chances was because Simone Inzaghi prepared the match very well. Not only Wallace marking Cristiano Ronaldo, but also the other Juventus star didn't shine yesterday. And, let's not forget that Juventus had so many options. Bernardeschi decided the match last Saturday and started against Lazio, but I hardly noticed him. Pjanic made a great goal, but apart from that, he's been struggling to find the rhythm against Lazio. I thought Inzaghi prepared the match very well yesterday. I don't know if you agree with me, Alistair.
I do, yeah. I find it very hard to find too many faults with anything that's happened tactically. I thought that team, the way it was organised defensively, was very impressive, and at the same time, yeah, like you said, I mean, it's hard to pick out too many impressive individual performances from Juventus because most of their danger men, if you like, were kept pretty quiet, and the goals they scored were good goals, and I'm not going to take umbrage with either of them particularly, but it wasn't it wasn't as a result of complete dominance. It was as a result of Juventus taking the chances that they got, and that's the kind of clinical edge that Lazio could learn from, and that this team needs to be better at, is making sure that the opportunities we get result in goals. But keeping Ronaldo that quiet is an impressive feat on his home debut with 40,000 fans there begging him to score a goal. And like you said, the depth that team has. I mean, the fact that he can put the likes of Paulo Dybala and Douglas Costa on the bench, it's crazy the resources Allegri has compared to other coaches in this league. So to come away with a 2-0 defeat is one thing, but I think on the whole it was a very balanced match, and tactically it was interesting the whole way through. And I don't think there's a time that's come yet where we can really take too many negatives from tactics and start questioning Faris or anything else, because I thought the team was, I agree with you. I think it was a well-prepared team for what they were up against.
One thing I wanted to talk about is Marco Parolo. He's vital for this team, at least in the past season. He's not getting any younger. I thought against Juventus he played decent, but not as well as in the past. Do you think this could be a little bit of concern? He's not young. Do you think he won't find a lot of time on the pitch in the next matches, seeing if, especially if Berisha will come in, will be able to play?
Well, I'm not sure. I think that this is probably the season where Parolo will start to be not phased out, but used more intelligently, as in more sparingly. You know, at his age and in the position he's in, to get the best out of him, we have to make sure he's not going to burn out. So he is still one of the most energetic players, not just in this team, but in the whole league. I mean, he runs an incredible distance at every match he plays in, and that his age is irrelevant really, because if he's still providing those figures, then he's obviously still capable of that. He's a fantastic athlete. So it is just a case of this being a squad now with enough midfield depth that Inzaghi's more capable this season of rotating Parolo and saving his game time than he was last season. There weren't too many alternatives available to him before, whereas I would say now, with the likes of Berisha when he returns from injury, and Murgia likewise, and Cataldi, he's got guys who, you know, are desperate to make an impact and who are capable of playing at a good high level. So I think it's just about being intelligent with Parolo and rotating him in and out of the team, because, you know, he played an incredible amount of matches last season, as did most of Inzaghi's first 11, to be honest.
A lot of people were asking for Cáceres to start against Juventus. After the performance of Lazio defense against Juventus, do you think Inzaghi is going to change against Frosinone, or do you expect to see the same line to play against Frosinone?
I think it has to be the same. 100%. Who are you going to drop from that defence after yesterday? There's only one player who is in that back three who's ever really up in doubt, and that's always the player on the right hand side. But with the way Wallace played yesterday, there's absolutely no way you can drop him. He might go and make a terrible error against Frosinone. I wouldn't put it past him, and then, you know, suddenly his position is in doubt again. But, you know, to play that well, it could be a real game-changing performance for him. So I think he has to keep it as it was.
Yeah, I agree. I was just thinking maybe Radu, who, I don't know, made a silly mistake yesterday. I don't know if you remember the back pass to Strakosha that created a little bit of issue to the goalkeeper. You know, as we said about Parolo, he's not getting younger. He had a little of problems, a little injury against Napoli. So knowing that Cáceres is left-footed, you can try and maybe see how Cáceres, Acerbi and Wallace played all together. And maybe Frosinone is the match where you can test things without risking too much.
I don't expect it to be a game where Inzaghi's testing much. I think he's, you know, having gone through the first 2 weeks without a win, he's going to have to go with his strongest team available. And I think, you know, Radu, he is, you know, the papers over here obviously do their player ratings after every game, which are taken quite seriously. And Radu was probably the player who came out worse from the Lazio team from yesterday. But I don't think one poor performance on his part is enough to justify being dropped from the team. I think he's done more than enough, and as our only natural left-sided player in that defence as well, I think he should start, because I think this is a game where, regardless of the opposition, there's an international break coming after it. We desperately need points. This is a game for Inzaghi to make sure he fields his complete strongest 11, no exceptions.
Yeah, I agree. It's a must-win match, so Inzaghi has to put the best option available to win it, because suddenly it became so important. 3 points would be really vital, considering how the season started. Ramel Gendi tweeted, "Who played with the number 13 today? Because that is not Wallace for sure." I thought it was the spirit of Alessandro Nesta who took possession of Wallace Saturday. Let's hope he continues. Yeah,
I was the new Nesta, the Brazilian Nesta. I know. I mean, it's he's not the only one who was surprised by that. I mean, we've spent a lot of time on this podcast in the past criticizing Wallace and having our heads in our hands about various things he's done. But you have to give players credit when it's due, and yeah, he was tremendous yesterday. He really was.
Yeah, let's not forget that he's only 23, if I'm not wrong, and he was playing for Monaco, so had an international experience. He was a starting player there, so he cannot be that bad. I think sometimes Lazio fans are too harsh. They focus on a player and start to, put too much pressure on that player who feels it. You can feel it at the stadium that fans are always concerned when someone gets the ball, and it's not easy to play like that, especially in a big stadium like the Stadio Olimpico. So it's not easy. But Wallace played well. Let's hope that he continues. Let's not forget that even last year, before the injury against Napoli, he was having a very good season. And then afterwards, he struggled to recover.
Yeah, exactly. Injuries play their part, confidence as well. I mean, you mentioned his youth, and I think it can be difficult for young players to cope with the kind of pressure that you're talking about from fans and Lazio fans. You can understand why there is this, I suppose, this kind of restlessness and eagerness for a good defender to come through, because it's been a long time since Lazio have really had a defensive partnership that they can trust. And I suppose you may be talking Biava Diaz is the last one that people were almost universally happy about. And since then, we've gone through all sorts of defenders. And now with this back three, at least one of the back three has been causing us a headache. So that I suppose is why there's this this kind of criticism that's directed towards defenders for making bad errors. But like you say, he's a young guy. He still has plenty of potential to improve. And yeah, let's really hope this is a season and not just a one-off.
I think we can wrap it up here. Alistair, do you have a nice stats for us?
Well, my main stat I'd actually already kind of subtly got into the podcast earlier on tonight, but I'll mention it again anyway. It's not a very nice one, though. It was just that we're now this has been the first time since 2006-2007 season that Lazio have gone the first two rounds without picking up any points. So that's not great, 12 years, but obviously everybody keep things in perspective. It's Napoli and Juve. It's two incredibly tough games, and yeah, like you said already, season starts next week.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will add that Opta Stats says that this is the first time since Simone Inzaghi is the manager that Lazio didn't win in the last 5 matches. So it's not only Napoli and Juventus, but the last 3 of last season that Lazio wasn't able to win with Simone Inzaghi. As usual, thank you very much, Alistair Mackenzie, to joining me. And remember, you can follow us on Twitter, on Facebook, and subscribe to our Patreon page, patreon.com/Lazio Lounge. And we'll talk next Monday after Lazio Frosinone. Alistair, don't feel too much pressure, but remember, it's your last chance, okay?
The Lazio Lounge listener is going to buy my one-way ticket back to Scotland after this if it goes wrong.
Oh, absolutely. We're gonna raise a little bit of money to send you back if we don't win next Sunday.
Let's hope for the best.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Alistair, and all of you to listen to the podcast. And remember, if you like our podcast, please rate and review us on iTunes. This is how we can get a little bit promotion on iTunes and get a little bit more audience. Thank you very much, guys, and talk to you next Monday.